Welcome to the Connect to Marriage podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. Does love follows a timeline? With some couples marrying later in life, what challenges and opportunities may arise?
Hello and welcome to the Connect to Marriage podcast. I'm Jo and I'm your host for this episode. In each episode of the Connect to podcast, we'll be tackling questions that couples ask about marriage, communication, conflict, life goals, and so much more. We hope you'll keep tuning in to learn with us as you grow closer, deeper, and stronger in your marriage. Now today we are exploring the topic of getting married later in life. Ooh, we seldom talk about this. We always assume that people who get married at the typical age. Well, in Singapore, that would be at age 30 for grooms and 29 for brides. At least that was 2 years ago. And we know that this number gradually increases over the years. And today we're actually very privileged to have with us Gregory and Patricia to share their own personal journey with us. Gregory is a lawyer and Pat is a seasoned marriage counselor, and they are really passionate about helping couples to thrive in their marriage, and that's why they also are involved in a marriage ministry or work called Marriage Builders, which I'll get them to explain as we go along in today's conversation. So welcome to the Connect to podcast, Greg and Pat.
Hi, Joan. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Joan. It's very, very nice to be here.
Yes, and today I think many listeners will be quite excited to hear about what we're going to talk about. Sometimes the only thing we associate late marriage with is maybe the Hollywood movie, I think was some years ago, the 40-year-old virgin, or then usually for the women it's terrible, right? Because they start calling us names when we don't get married, and then there's a lot of pressure in Singapore, pressure from government as well to quick get married, start a family, have many kids because we have a fertility crisis on hand. But we're gonna just have you guys share your love story and how you finally came to tie the knot.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting journey for us, having to say that we get married in our mid-40s, and this is our 10 years of our marriage.
Okay, so which means that at 10 years ago when you got married in your mid-40s, actually that would have been rarer than today, right? I would think so.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
I think you sort of summed it up well. That's something that's a bit more unusual. I think for us, we were quite fulfilled singles, each focused on our work, on our ministries, and even in terms of our lives, our circle of friends, contented, connected, and very much waiting for the right person at the right time. It may have taken a little bit longer, but I think in a way, maybe we'd like to believe that it's a divine hand at work that sort of connected you to the one person that you were meant to marry.
Right.
And so that's the experience for us in a nutshell.
I guess some people would be really waiting, maybe anxiously waiting. Was that your experience, or was it something that, you weren't even thinking about it until much later in life?
Many of us, if I could say, in our early 20s or in our 20s, right, we actually thought of, even for myself, I thought that I would naturally meet my Mr. Right, right? It would come naturally and then I'll get married. But I think it doesn't apply for all, at least for me. In my past 2 relationships in my 20s, it didn't end up in marriage. And of course, I experienced disappointment, and also the emotional roller coasters. And of course, that made me decide at the time to be disengaged with the idea of getting married, or even to disengage from wanting to be emotionally engaged with someone, fear of going through the emotional roller coaster again. So then that was a very intentional decision for myself that I want to be single. Even at the age of late 20s.
Right. So actually when you met, it wasn't that you were actively seeking nor patiently waiting.
No, not for me.
And likewise, there's a symmetry about my own journey. I mean, I was in 2 prior relationships, and I think in my 20s and right into the 30s as well, there probably was a very strong perfectionistic streak in the sense of just having one relationship, and that relationship leads you down the altar, and everyone lives happily ever after. But maybe there was a process where this strong perfectionistic streak needed to be molded, needed to be, kind of remade, broken. And for me, as a Christian, I believe God was behind that, to do some of that shaping and that influencing, so that by the time I was in my 40s, it was really a place of surrender, in the sense of, if I was meant to be single, then needed to have that grace to deal with loneliness, all the way through to, your older age. But if you're meant to be married, then you need to have a very clear signal from the top who the right person was.
Right.
And I believe that over the decades, from the 20s right through to the 40s, I believe God was busy preparing me to be the right person to the right person. If that makes sense. And although some people may say that it looks like your options are getting less and less, grab whoever's left, but because the journey will be different for men and women. But I did feel that actually, in a very interesting way, it's not that your options are getting less, but actually God is narrowing your path to meet the right person
It's like
at
more
the right time.
refined criteria, but yet less perfectionistic.
Yes. And
That's a very interesting
Yeah.
state of criteria.
And it's paradoxical, but it's the molding and maybe maturing, maybe mellowing perhaps also,
Right.
of temperaments. And that's why, interestingly enough, I think, even though, of course, some people would say that the older that you are, the more set you are in your ways, and it's much harder to adapt,
Yeah.
or to be, very nimble.
Like you have to give up more things, right? That you've already been used to for like the past, 20 years since you last actively looked for a life partner, and then now you got to change your ways to accommodate somebody else in your life.
Exactly. And some people will find that a tough proposition, or perhaps even a very difficult negotiable. But I think we both found, in the course of marriage, and certainly even pre-marriage, that we didn't have too much difficulty in making space,
Okay.
and in making time for each other, and in accommodating and
Right,
adapting to
right,
each other. And
right.
so maybe part of that was the preparation phase in the time frame that it took for us to reach that stage of marriage.
Right.
Yes, that is really quite an amazing journey for us, because even for myself, how I was being prepared for this marriage, which I didn't expect that it would come, because I was all ready to be single. My mom thought that I would, I wouldn't get married. So in my waiting phase, the period of waiting, not that I was waiting, but somehow in that phase that I shut
just-
myself,
right.
right? I felt that by focusing on my career, focusing on serving children ministry, actually I was developing in the area of my characters, as well as also in maturity. I think the turning point for me in my life stage was actually in my early 40s, when my sister passed on. During that journey, it was really learning to be still. To be still, because I think in our society, actually we are pretty busy with work, with things around us, with our responsibility to parents and to people around us. So learning to be still is really not doing anything, and that was a process for me, because it's not easy for me to learn to be still.
So was it in this faith encounter that you kind of started to change your mind about being against the marriage?
Not intentionally. I think that was the start of the phase where maybe I could say God is preparing me for something that He has in store for me in every aspect, in terms of my own desire, the way I perceive things, or the way I want things to be like before God, and whatever that comes, it will be a privilege. Actually, we knew each other since early 20s, but somehow he reappeared in my life again.
Okay.
Yeah, we were friends for 20 over years. We somehow reconnect again.
Right.
Reconnected in our early 40s. And that's where God started to speak in my heart, that to pray for this man. And I have to learn to wait, because for me, I believe that to wait for the man to bring up the topic, right?
Make the first move.
Yeah, make the
first move.
Okay. I wanted to ask this before we talk about how the spark started. But Greg, you mentioned that as people grow older, then we feel that there's fewer fish in the pond. They've all been taken up, the good ones especially. But I think most of the times we probably feel that the woman pet, right, has it a little bit more difficult. Would you say that actually, even though, I know you shared about how you kind of determined to stay single and enjoy your singlehood,
Yes.
but it was a little bit more because of disappointment with prior relationships, and as you went through this faith encounter and began to be more open towards, like, even having a relationship again, would you say that desire comes with that anxiety that maybe even fewer fish in the pond?
No, actually, it was very clear that Greg is the one. Then at that time, it's really wonder where, right? Because I shut my heart for so long,
right?
Wanting to re-engage emotionally with an opposite agenda. But when after reconnecting with Greg and also walking through that journey, starting to have this little spark towards this man.
So you knew he was the one, but he took a while? How long did you take, Greg, before you realized that you were the one?
Marriage is one of the most rewarding things in life. Yet, navigating marriage as newlyweds or an engaged couple can sometimes get overwhelming. Whether it's managing expectations of the in-laws, getting a good grasp of your family finances, or establishing good habits of communication and healthy conflict. Focus on the Family Singapore's Marriage Preparation Program aims to help you build a solid foundation in the early years and prepare you for the adventure of your life. Visit family.org.sg/C2 Marriage Prep for more information today.
We knew each other in our 20s. I made the point about the right person to the right person. And that's true because you actually have a friend, but the process of time and the experiences of life, the maturing journey, which includes also the sort of faith encounters, prepare you, enable you both to be the right person to each other. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, therefore, that you must wait till your 50s, 60s, 70s, and that's the gold standard. Because I think part of the journey as well for many, many people, and we acknowledge ours is probably in the more unusual category, but the journey for many people is that, you grow together and you have that grace to grow together and you give each other the space and the time to develop as best you can.
You weren't in touch during those 20 years when you were friends?
On and off.
Were you? Okay.
On and off, I think at various junctures, but we could sort of like pick up the conversation from where we left off as friends. We were volunteers in a charity, helped to found it, the charity for children with cancer. And so over the years, there was still this connection. And then we reconnected more intentionally after Pat's family experienced that tragedy that she mentioned, and then had the privilege to reconnect after that setting. As I shared also, it was very much a kind of surrendered outlook where if I was meant to be single, then that's fine if that's the story. I was also a speaker in some single seminars. So it was like, that's to prove that it wasn't just rhetoric. It was really real. I was, in that setting speaking to singles, including on, self-control before marriage. And I think like Pat, I also heard and sensed very strongly, and it was probably, at least to my estimation, a divine sense that she was the right person. So in a very unusual way, it was something that probably, unlike many, many journeys, and I'm not going to say that this is the only way or the right way or the proper way, but it started in a sense spiritually. We both had a spiritual sense that we were meant to be the ones for each other, and then it ended up in an emotional connection, and then of course after marriage it's a physical connection. So that was the journey, kind of like spiritual and then emotional and then
Although actually
physical.
part of that was already the friendship that has been there all along the past 20 years.
All along.
But you just never saw each other as the potential life partner until...
I think we needed new lenses. And some of those lenses come with age, like real life. But part of it was also unusual because, I think some singles will basically feel incomplete without your significant other. Or like your potential life partner, and it's like, that's my priority. I need to get married first, and then I will feel fulfilled and I'll feel that I can be the best version of myself. But I think the beauty is that I think we were both very, very fulfilled singles. If you look at pictures of Pat, even in her single days, you will see the joy, you will see the peace, and the fact that, she was caregiver to her sister's daughter, and yet she was just so radiant. And it's because I think of a deep sense of contentment, and she wouldn't be wrested out of it unless she knew there was actually a kind of special person that God had sort of prepared for her, and likewise for me. And so we were both, in a sense, in the Marriage Builders Alliance, here's the irony, right? Two singles in Marriage Builders Alliance.
So you were in this marriage ministry or outfit even before you were married?
Even before we were married. So that's the irony, because a lot of singles may steer out of it and say, look, it's nothing to do with me. Why am I helping other people to get married when I'm not married myself, right? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. But we were involved in that and helping to also build marriages of others. And so that was the extent and maybe even the peace, just the deep assurance that in God's time, He'll make all things beautiful. But if part of that beauty was to remain single, that's perfectly fine. And so then the sparks happened after the clear sense that she was the one. And then one thing led to another.
That was 1.5 years after she got her indication.
The men don't usually get it. I think that the ladies get it faster, the ladies get it sharper, and the men have to be knocked on the head perhaps sometimes, No, I'm just half joking. But there is some truth in that. I think maybe some cases there needs to be that time frame when you realize and have an epiphany.
So it sounds like, the benefit really of like marrying later in life is that you have two individuals who are coming into the relationship and starting off really on very good footing. And two individuals who, like you said, are already self-confident. They're not looking for somebody else to complete them. And that's probably, I guess, they will contribute, I guess, to a healthier relationship and healthier interactions, because you don't feel so insecure or you don't feel, so easily provoked, I guess.
So one is a whole number, and we tend to forget that. But, the power when two who are secure, and I think as you captured it brilliantly, we can actually have a multiplying effect on each other, because we're not looking to be completed or to fulfill our needs from each other. And of course, we recognize that we are there to fulfill each other's needs. But the point is really that from the point of view of our own lens, there is that security, that stability, and that ability also to have a multiplying effect on each other, and to maybe even be a catalyst to the dreams and the destiny of each other. And to marriage, that's also possible, where we are each other's cheerleaders and champions.
Right. It seems that you also had the advantage because you were already sharing some common goals and interests and passions. If you could share, what are some of the downsides of marrying later and how do you overcome it? I know this is an audio podcast, so our listeners can't actually tell, but Pat is actually Chinese and Greg is Indian. So I don't know, the cross-cultural challenges as well, and expectations from different cultures of marrying late plus marrying across cultures?
Yeah, I think because I come from a traditional Chinese family, so never we talk about or think about marrying cross-culturally. If thrown back to time, if it is in my 20s, I don't think it would be something that I could embrace, because it's like very stereotype. A Chinese must marry a Chinese. So then I think later in part, frankly, I don't look at Greg as he is an Indian. He's really just a man who God has brought him into my life. Right. But there is also something that I observed when I told my mom that Greg is going to visit us. So my mom made a statement. So Greg is like so-and-so. And so-and-so is a friend of mine who is an Indian. And that statement struck me, because to my mom, it means an Indian does make a difference through her lens. But because my friend so-and-so has a very good rapport with my mom, sort of already helped her to open up her ideas of having a different race. So I thought that was something that I'm very thankful. My parents love Greg and embraced his, who he is very well. For myself, thank God, that despite of us of different culture, but I think because of our same faith, that actually draw us together.
Yeah, I think Pat has hit the right nails on the head, because I think the common faith was the bond, the strong glue that bonded us together, united us, and gave us the foundation or the bedrock that enabled us build the courtship and the marriage. And I use the word courtship because at the time we sensed that God may be bringing us both to each other. Then before the courtship started, I had learned some lessons about courtship, and I asked permission from her dad, mind you, when she was in her mid-40s, but asked permission from her dad to court her. And I said, if you say no, it stops right here. And that, of course, involves risk, because the father may well say, nope, and that's the end of the matter. That's hard, it's tough, but, we had the blessings right at the onset. And I think really, to add on to what Pat said as well, I think looking back in this last 10 years of marriage, and even in the pre-marriage courtship phase, never felt, and it's really by, again, grace, never felt that the race issue ever created a wedge between the two of us, and acknowledge each one is going to have their own unique journey. I do believe love is colorblind in that sense. We had glorious opportunities to celebrate each other's culture, each other's heritage, traditions, whether it's Chinese New Year.
Now it's doubly rich.
Doubly rich is doubly rich. So it's not divide by two, it's actually multiplied by two. And just seeing that richness flow into our lives, not being less than ourselves, but actually seeing the enhancement and the multiplying effect. And so for that, I think we are quite thankful. That doesn't mean you expect everything to be rosy and comfortable, and it doesn't mean that we haven't had to navigate some of the issues which come with every married couple and every married couple's own experience, because it's a minor miracle to see two people who are very different from their heritage, their tradition, their personality, their love languages, and so on, just come together, stay together, live together, and journey together in the course of marriage. And for that, like every other couple, we have had our own unique journey.
Maybe one last thing, marrying later in life also means that we may have to contend with like issues of self-control, for example, sexual self-control. But I suppose because both of you also mentioned that you had prior relationships, for someone out there who is, or a couple out there who's married later, does this mean they bring even more baggage into their new relationship? And maybe on the other hand, it's also, I guess for the woman, right, we're always kind of worried about our biological clock. And if a person has desire, for example, to have children, like how do you navigate such things?
I think we did on the onset that talk about whether we both desire to have children, and I think we were open to talk about it. Both of us sense that that's not our need. I think Greg is also aware of my age then, the risk of having a child. Personally, I also approach it in a way that whether he desires to have a child. So it was a very open conversation and on the very onset. And then we both do have like-minded to know and very secured and contented that we are happy, not plan to have family planning.
So to pick up on that, I think, the transparency is important. The open communication, the discussions in a way that doesn't catch either party by surprise. And I think to put it another way, it's really, if it happens, it happens. But if it doesn't happen and fruitfulness comes in other ways, and there can be other applications of that. For instance, we are godparents to a few children, and we have other adults who are like children to us. And it shouldn't come from a place of fear. It's just recognizing that there is a unique marriage story, a unique love story for each married couple. And for many, many married couples, we acknowledge that, yes, there will be the journey of being a parent, of being a parent to children. And there's going to be a joy with that. There's going to be, of course, a lot of grace for that, strength for that. The kind of open, direct, honest conversations, critical part of the equation. But dialing back to the first part of what you said, I think it is true that there probably will be more baggage, and it's purely a function of time, because you've lived more of life. You live more of life. If you've had prior relationships, there will be hurt, probably wounds in your life that may come from rejection. For example, if your girlfriend or boyfriend was the one who had broken up with you, of course you have to deal with that. This is real. And there needs to be this journey of inner healing, and that's part of the preparation of being the right person to the right person, so you don't bring in baggage from the past or step on each other's emotional landmines. Exactly. And then, oh, wow, I set off something there, right? So I think that's very much the case. And then, of course, I think maybe what you're alluding to is also the whole sexual part. And I think for that, of course, the ideal is to keep yourself pure, to keep yourself self-controlled. But we're human. And I think, that sometimes many of us will make our mistakes. And so there's a question then of how do you get healed from some of that and just do things in the right way, in the honoring way. So it may surprise you, but even in our courtship, we didn't hold hands. So we were in premarital causes where, younger couples are all holding hands, and it's like, wow, this old fuddy-duddies obviously belong to the Victorian era and, aren't even holding hands, But that's just an example of what we thought was the standard that we wanted to live by. It's only after marriage that, physical parts have come in.
Wow. It's interesting because, I mean, both of you were not really thinking of actively, at least, about getting married, and you had your own qualms. But it sounds like, when you kind of saw each other in a different light as potential life partner, you had that. I think the word that keeps coming up is the contentment and the surrender to approach all these issues. And it sounds actually very mature, very well thought through, no unnecessary drama.
Yeah. Maybe even does it sound fictional? Does it sound too good to be true? Are we making it up? No, but this is the real path. But the context, of course, is that, we did make our mistakes. You can say that in terms of our past relationships and the learning points that came from that. But the faith encounters, the healing, the preparation, and ultimately, as you rightly put it, the contentment and surrender, which are the themes that probably may reflect our journey, I think was a significant part bringing us to the right footing. But I also think that having permission from Pat's father right at the onset to court her was critical.
Wow.
Yeah, because that blessing, that unconditional yes, was the green light. You felt accountable because you're basically courting the daughter. You felt accountable to the father. But that also means you have the protection because you know that the father has okayed the courtship.
This gives our listeners actually many things to think about. Quite counterculture and probably not often heard about. We will carry on this conversation in our next podcast, but in each episode, actually, we do address a frequently asked question that couples have about marriage. And there is a question today about, someone who's not quite married yet, but hoping to get married soon. This person is in his or her 40s and does desire to settle down, but not sure how to meet potential partners without going for awkward blind dates. And this person is in their 30s, already quite focused on hitting career goals, not really active in social life. Okay, what would you recommend? I know you guys knew each other for a long time. Any tips?
Of course, you want to try and have opportunities to socialize, attend social gatherings, community events, networking functions that, kind of align with your own interests and passions because you could meet someone that has a common interest or passion. And in that setting, you might find you hit it off. Initial sparks do fly. The other is, of course, to rely on your good friends, and there are many people who have benefited from good friends and related to that. And even though this may sound quite old-fashioned and maybe Victorian era again, even the parents can play a good role in matchmaking in that sense, or maybe even making suggestions.
Right.
And you don't have to be constrained by them, but your parents know you best. So there's some good ideas that may come from parents who have seen you grown up. There are also dating websites that are reputable or apps, and we wouldn't rule that out because there are also people who have benefited from that. Do your due diligence, ensure that it is reputable and it's not some kind of love scam. You're not kind of seduced by what you see, and frankly, even for online relationships, sometimes, it is in-person dimensions that, you really see the start or even the complementary aspects of that relationship begin to take off. One is to be patient. Patience is key because if you're anxious, if you're very angsty about settling down and you feel that the clock is ticking and, there is that anxiety, it will surface in the way that you relate to people. And you're subconsciously and even in a non-verbal way communicating that anxiety, which could actually then be counterproductive because then the person that is sitting down with you may feel pressured and may feel, this person really the right person, or are they pushy to achieve a certain goal? So that's number one. But the other is that you're never too old to get married. And I think hopefully our journey, and no doubt we're not in our 70s and walking stick or something, never too old to get married. And so that's the comfort, that if our story can inspire some who are still looking, waiting, that may be hopefully an encouragement that there is still someone out there, sleepless in Seattle perhaps.
Yeah, for ladies who are actually desiring to find the Mr. Right, and going through, it's like the clock is ticking. Continue to enjoy being single, because singlehood is really, it's a gift, because able to embrace and this journey, because you don't know, once you step into marriage, it will be a different role that you play. So enjoy the time in the singlehood to continue to build yourselves and in areas of in your characters, in building your community support, through building trusted friendship, and also building areas of talents, the talents that you have. Also, like what Greg said, be patient in this waiting period. And for myself, it's really learning to be still, to wait. And actually, a lot of times in the time of waiting, we find and discover ourselves, to know more of ourselves. So it is a beautiful journey, and it's never shortchanged, because I truly believe that whether you are a single or you're married, both are gifts, and we can enjoy in either one.
Thank you both so much for sharing your love story as well as your life story. I'm quite sure that our listeners out there will be encouraged in some way. We have a couple challenge as usual at the end of our podcast, and today's couple challenge, you've heard both Greg and Pat share a lot about contentment, and in fact, I can feel how contented they are with life, with themselves, with each other as well. So if you're listening to this podcast with your spouse, will you just take a quick 5 minutes to share one thing about your marriage that you feel contented about with your spouse? All right. And if you are not yet married but desire to meet someone, perhaps take the next few minutes to think of, who you can kind of share this with, so that you don't feel angsty about your journey, and you can have a trusted friend to walk alongside you. Well, we hope you've enjoyed today's podcast. And if you're looking for more practical resources to grow your marriage, do visit our website at family.org.sg to browse our articles or check out even our upcoming marriage programs. We hope you follow and subscribe to our Connect 2 podcast, and do share this episode with a friend who may also benefit from it. So until next time, take care of yourself and your spouse.